It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that desperately wants to know, where were you last night? Who were you with? I'm Christy Powell, and for the podcast audience, my co-host tonight has a jawline we can all be envious of. Welcome, Nate Smith.
Thank you, Christy. I never knew you cared.
And our guest tonight is the ethical slut of ACA hosts from Truth Wanted, the nonprofits, and everywhere else. Welcome, Puck.
Welcome. Thank you. That's probably the best way to put me. I can't stick to just one show. I want to spread the love to as many different shows as possible. And now here I am on Secular Sexuality again.
Yeah, please feel free to put that on your CV. I think that the world needs to know that you are the ACA
official
slut.
Ethical
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Spreading the love like peanut butter. I'm so glad I get to finally be on a show with Puck. And I'm not at all jealous.
Yeah, we've been kind of we run in the same circles, you and I, Nate, but we never seem to be on the same screen at the same time, and now here we are.
Well, now we are both docked in the same port. So in the spirit of breaking down our jealous breakdowns this evening, I'm going to try not to be envious to be surrounded by two hosts with better hair than I have. Yeah, it's true. I can admit it. It's true. But folks, give us a call and participate in the conversation. Give us a call, 512-991-9242, or on the interwebs at tiny.cc/callsex, because the show is coming in hot right now.
All right. So diving right in, Puck, we're talking about compersion tonight. What is it? What does it do? I mean, walk us through this neologism and what these new words mean to you.
Okay. Well, compersion, it's hard to talk about compersion without talking about jealousy. And one of the best ways to describe compersion is the opposite of jealousy. When you're jealous of someone, something good happens to them and you feel envious. You feel maybe it should have happened to you, or you feel that you would have deserved it a little bit more, or you feel that they did something that makes it so they're not worthy of it. Compersion is the exact opposite. Something happens to someone else that is good and you feel good for them. You feel genuinely happy. And I think what makes compersion for me is when I see someone else, like, you know, when I see an ACA show being super successful and I see new hosts getting added, even if it was something that I may have wanted for myself, I am so happy that so many voices get added into this community, and I'm glad for the people who are able to do it. So there's a quick definition in a nutshell. There's so much depth to it, but that's a quick start.
Yeah, no, I love that you gave us an example that is outside of relationships and outside of polyamory or non-monogamy, because we are going to be talking a little bit about non-monogamy, which I know applies to a segment of our audience that I certainly am glad is here. But honestly, I feel like our poly folks probably get this idea, and frankly, the word compersion, I kind of wish that we could like pluck that out and pull it away from just talking about it in the context of non-monogamy. I feel like our culture, our language needs a better word for I'm happy, you're happy. So, you know, with that in mind, I think that there is a lot to this idea and a lot that could be beneficial to folks in monogamous relationships. When we're talking about compersion, I generally think that we are looking at ideas of autonomy, of boundaries, of love, or maybe love, joy. I mean, does that kind of encompass the whole conversation for you?
Yeah, it does. And one reason that this word gets thrown in poly communities especially is because there is this idea that's been put into us either societally or just by habit that once you are in a relationship, you you and the other person relationship must mutually and exclusively fulfill all of each other's needs. And now, of course, it's not reasonable for any one person to be able to do that for any other person. So we pick certain things that are exclusive to relationships. For better or worse, sex seems to be one of those big things, and emotional closeness is another one that gets put in there. Intimacy, spending time, but there are so many other aspects of relationships where just how do I put this? Just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean the other person doesn't stop being their own person, right? They
Sure.
still have their own goals, they still have their own desires, their own ambitions, and their own pleasures. And for some things, it's really easy to be happy for another person. Like if they regularly play on a poker night and they win, you don't really care for poker, so you're happy that they won. That's great. It's a little different when it's something that you feel you should or ought to have been able to fulfill. And that's where we get into some real interesting, sticky conversations.
Yeah, and it's so arbitrary. Like you kind of listed out, like as a society, we tend to believe that sexuality is one of those elements that becomes like exclusive in your romantic relationship. And then you said emotional intimacy, which is, I mean, you're not wrong, but how do we separate out emotional intimacy versus like romantic emotions versus, how close are we supposed to get to our friends? For the longest time, I feel like the dividing line was just based on gender. Were we talking about somebody who is same gender or opposite gender? But obviously that distinction left a lot of people out in the cold and failed to capture the, nuances of human sexuality. And the truth is, I know so many couples that would be way more upset if you, watched the latest episode of your favorite TV show with somebody else versus having sex with somebody else. Like
the Netflix cheat.
yeah, no, that is so much worse in so many people's relationships, and that's fine and great and wonderful. But it does feel really arbitrary that we define monogamy in these like kind of narrow ways around our sexuality, but not necessarily encompassing ththese other categories. I mean, the whole thing feels a little bit messy, and so I'm glad that we are kind of breaking all of this down tonight.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be having this conversation because as I talk to a lot of people, I hear that this is a completely new concept to them, and it was new to me just a few years ago, also. But having existed in poly spaces and getting to see firsthand my own transition from having monogamous relationships in the past to how I view relationships and my partner's happiness now. Maybe part of my journey can be somebody else's roadmap, and we'll see if we can't help some people out who might be in different stages along the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nate, please go ahead.
I was just going to say I completely agree with what I think you're trying to say, that these lines that we're drawing are pretty much artificial. Like there's very few facets of life where you would expect one person to fulfill all of your needs for, whether it be friendship or companionship or anything, professionally speaking, right? Like you don't expect to only have, one coworker that you get along with, or, one supervisor that you like, right? We're expected to be poly in other parts of our life, but when it comes to our sexual relationships, there's this sort of artificial limitation where it's only got to be this one person.
Yeah. So like the two places where this it seems like immediately can go is we can talk about how the idea of your partner being sexually fulfilled or even having a sexual interest in another person. We could talk about how that has to do with compersion, or we could go a different way and talk about how there are so many other facets in a relationship other than sexuality that even if you don't, open your relationship in a sexual romantic way, there are still ways that the idea of compersion can help even a monogamous relationship. And I think we're going to do the latter this time.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah. We're going to go with friends first.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
always
mean,
the best way to start off. Friends first.
right? Yeah. No, I mean, there are a lot of different pieces that we could be looking at here, but underlining all of it, I think, is getting back to a place where we respect each other's autonomy. It's so important, I think, to recognize just how arbitrary and made up some of our ideas around monogamy are. That's not to say that monogamy itself isn't valid. It's just to suggest that we are so often handed this like template of what a relationship is supposed to entail, and that template rarely fits everybody. And to be very clear, I am not encouraging everybody who is listening tonight to fall in love with or go have sex with somebody other than their partner. That's really not what I'm getting at. My thought here is just recognizing that our sense of fidelity, of trust and faithfulness and connection covers a lot of different categories. And we don't always treat it that way. We sort of take it for granted that, like, oh, well, this is something we share with everybody, and this is something we share with only a partner. And I think that that belief system really damages our ability to have intimate friends. I think for a lot of people, it in particular prevents having closeness with people who are of the opposite gender. And it forces us to do certain things with our partner that they're maybe not interested in doing with us. Like my partner is always up for a good time and always willing to kind of go along with things if I ask. But I mean, she's got maybe 2, possibly 3/4 worth of a football game in her per season. And that's about it. And it's totally socially acceptable for me to watch football with somebody else, but it's not socially acceptable for me to talk about my feelings with somebody else. I mean, maybe it is, but how deep are we allowed to go? Where is that line? And I think that embracing the idea of compersion is a interesting way of maybe giving ourselves permission to have just broader, healthier types of relationships.
Yeah, and I think, like, now that I'm thinking about it, a great way to describe what this means for me is that I am happy when my partner is fulfilled, regardless of whether or not I'm the one who's doing the fulfilling. If my partner really needs to have a good talk with someone who's gone through something similar, and has some shared experiences, and just really needs to have that conversation, that bond, that closeness with someone who she can relate to better than I can, I am happy that opportunity was there for her, even if I was not part of it. And we can apply this to emotional closeness, but we can apply this to just about anything. We can apply this to just regular activities. Like she likes some video games that I don't particularly care for, but I'm glad that there's an opportunity for that need to be fulfilled. And this is where our monogamous friends can learn something from the poly relationships, because it doesn't have to necessarily be about building other relationships. It can also just be about being okay with your partner being fulfilled by something other than what you're providing.
Yeah. Well, so to that end, I think that it's human to feel jealous. And we're going to talk a little bit about jealousy and what jealousy or envy or what some of these ideas actually look like and mean. But it's worth noting that it is a absolutely human emotion. And we're not talking about like deleting or removing that. Maybe we're talking about perhaps soothing that emotion with compersion or with some of these other ideas. We're all kind of struggling through this pandemic. We've all been kept away from a lot of people, and we've seen maybe some of our acquaintances like drift away after not being able to see them for a year. And I know a lot of folks are coming into my therapy office feeling really lonely. And yet it's really natural in that kind of context, if your partner makes a new friend, for instance, to perhaps feel a little bit envious of that, to wish that maybe you had made a new friend, or could we share that friend? And so I don't want to make this into something that's inherently sexual or inherently romantic, while acknowledging that these emotions that we put in certain categories or that we ascribe to like different aspects of our life really apply everywhere. Yeah. So, if we absolutely can acknowledge that you can be jealous of your partner making a new friend, I think we can also acknowledge that it's okay to have that emotion of, I am so happy that you're happy, and maybe feel something like compersion in that category. I think we can maybe draw a bit of a spectrum, but I'm just curious about y'all's thoughts or reactions on where I'm at so far.
No, well, the first thing I wanted to say is that this is such a huge topic that if just from the three of us, we're talking about a lot of different things, and if anybody is listening and we're not talking about what you would like us to talk about, or we're not bringing something up you think is important, or if we did bring something up but didn't go into the depth that you would want, please feel free to call and we'll talk this out. And immediately after saying that, I completely lost my first train of thought. So.
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely normal to feel jealousy when it comes to seeing your partner made a new friend or got a promotion or whatever. But it's the ability to sort of take a step back and self-analyze and realize that should I be feeling this way? No, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And actually, you know what? I should be happy for them, and trying to walk yourself through that process of getting to a better place, I think, is really important. And I get that a lot too, because my partner and I have completely different circles of friends. There's a little bit of overlap, but not much. And he'll often go off and spend the weekend with his anime friends in a completely different town. And I'll spend the weekend, as you said, playing poker or playing Xbox with my friends. And we've gotten to the point, it took a few years, but we've gotten to the point where we're absolutely completely comfortable with that. I mean, after 10 years, getting a break from your partner is not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
You're all the stronger for
uncomfortable.
it.
Yeah, a lot of people feel uncomfortable with those ideas. They feel threatened that maybe their relationship isn't good enough because we get bored around each other. I mean, after this pandemic and these experiences of being quarantined, I think that maybe people are loosening up on some of those ideas. But I talk to people all the time that are like, my partner and I are bored when we're around each other, and there must be something wrong with our relationship. And then I'll start talking to them, and it's like they haven't seen anybody but their partner in months. They haven't had any meaningful conversations outside of work. They haven't just gone to a restaurant or seen a movie or had a drink with somebody other than their partner. And they're wondering why they don't have anything to talk about with their partner.
No, and it makes me wonder, like when we talk about toxic traits and toxic relationships, how much of toxicity is about expectations and about these are the relationships that have been shown to me, therefore this is what I believe relationships are, and then not being able to let go of that mindset. Now relationships are very different. And so the idea of I have my partner, but you know what? I still really like my alone time, to the point where if my partner and I have the same day off, we're actually going to schedule separate activities. Like I have about like a 2-3 hour window because of my introvertedness where I can spend that much time with someone. Then I start to get really jittery, like, okay, where's my exit plan? Where's my escape route? And this doesn't stop just because of, there's a romantic relationship and there's still that need there to be your own person and let your partner be their own person. So I'm feeling all of that you were saying.
Yeah, so you're highlighting an important
totally
piece of this. Yeah, something I really want to make sure to highlight here is the importance of maintaining your autonomy when you're in a relationship. So there's actually an exercise that I often will kind of walk through some of my clients through when we're talking about not the need to be alone or the need to do your own thing, but maybe the permission to do your own thing and to live your own life within a relationship. And so I'll often ask people, and I'm curious y'all's experience, Puck and Nate, as I'm talking, how do you feel? Like, what feelings does it bring up for you if your partner were to make a new friend? Does that immediately trigger a sense of jealousy? Does that trigger a sense of compersion? Are you happy for them or delighted for them?
I personally love it because and this is just for me, and I get everybody's gonna have a different experience, but I think Nate was saying that my partner and I run completely different social circles. I will, I have my interest, she has her interest, and even in the times when we have the same interest, we do it with different groups of people, right? So when she tells me about someone new that she met that she had a really good time with, someone new who joined the player circle, or even someone just as a personal friend, it feels really nice for me. because I know how nice I feel when I meet a new friend, and so I just imagine that happiness, and I am happy that someone else gets to feel it. Not only that, but having another person as a friend to my partner sometimes brings out aspects of her that may not have had an outlet otherwise. And, she discovers a new interest or emotion even, and then brings it into our relationship also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's genuinely, not just personally benefit, but I personally actually feel great whenever my partner meets someone new. Now, it was not always like this.
Sure.
And in my earlier days of dating, not just in this relationship, but before I even had this, where I was so nervous about losing my partner. I had that mentality that I'm not that attractive. I don't have that much to offer. This is the last chance at romance and love in a relationship I'm ever going to have. So if there's even the slightest sign that this person is interested in someone else, it doesn't even have to be more than me, just interested in someone else other than me. It sent that panic feeling in there. Like what?
Yeah, that scarcity
Yeah.
mindset, that idea that if this relationship doesn't work out, that everything is fucked, or
Right.
yeah, that can get us into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But
So
let
it
me
took
ask
a
you
while
this,
to
going
switch
down the line a little bit. How do you feel if your partner receives a compliment? You're both getting a cup of coffee or something, and they stand in front of you in line, and the barista or whatever else says something nice about their bag, their nails, their jacket, their whatever. I mean, what does that bring up in you then?
It happens to me all the time. Actually, not too long ago, a good-looking young gentleman passed my partner their phone number. And of course, he comes home and he tells me about it, and I'm like, "Wow, good for you! You still got it there, bud." But no, it doesn't bother me at all. Or to your previous question, you had asked, if he were to make a new friend. For me, this might be a terrible reason to be happy, but for me, it's like, okay, great, yeah, go hang out with him for a little while, and I can play Xbox,
Yeah.
But it's
Sure.
it's completely healthy because like we know each other so well, and we've been together for so long that having a little bit of space is great. And like Puck was saying, if it gives him a chance to express some sides of his personality that he doesn't really get to express with me, like my partner is very, very gay. He's like, literally, you can see it from space. And as like I don't really present as a gay man, like you would probably never figure it out unless I told you. So like he likes to get out with the girls and go cat around and do their thing. And I really do not feel comfortable in that situation. It's sort of foreign for me. So I absolutely encourage him to get out with his friends and party it up. But no, him being complimented is awesome, because I'm like, hey, I'm hitting that.
No, exactly. And I think that last piece, that last thing that you threw in there, that's like, hey, I'm hitting that. I feel like that borders on compersion. Like that brings into it this idea that him being attractive or interesting or having a nice whatever the hell is something that you can actually celebrate in and actually enjoy. Nate, to connect with something you were saying, I'm largely straight. I often say on this show that I'm like sort of cis-ish, het-ish, monogamish, there's a lot of squish here. But because I paint my fingernails and I suppose just the way I carry myself, I think I often code as maybe gay or some other adjectives. I don't want to overly imagine what's in people's minds. But because of that, when I'm out with my partner, who is a woman, I think people rarely recognize us as a couple. And it's really, really common for straight women to compliment me on my nails specifically. And it's honestly very interesting the way that people sort of react and respond to that. But at the same time, I think for my partner, who is kind of in charge of my nail upkeep, she always points out, like, it reflects well on her when I'm getting those kinds of compliments. And I think that's an important piece to all this.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. It's taking pride in the fact that you made a good choice.
Yeah. Well, so how comfortable are you, or what? Maybe comfort is the wrong word, because I don't really want to frame this in terms of right and wrong, but just being aware of your own emotions. How do you feel when you find out that somebody has mentioned your partner as being attractive? You know, maybe it's not like an in the moment, like flirting right in front of you kind of thing, but somebody just sort of lets it slip or expresses like, "Oh, who's that hottie over there?" What kind of emotions does that bring up for you?
No, there was a time, like I said, like early in my dating where I would have been like, back off, she's mine. But being flirted with, being complimented feels great, and it gives you this confidence boost, right? And if someone says something to my partner that makes her feel that elevated, that helps out our relationship too. So it's not like I'm missing out on anything. And so I learned to think of it that way. It's not that someone is trying to take. Sometimes people just give a compliment to give an honest compliment. Nice hair, Puck. And that's the beginning and end of it. And it makes you feel good about the choices you've made, and makes you feel good about you. And I am genuinely happy when my partner feels that happy about herself, especially, there are some people out there who really just don't get complimented very much. And so when they do, the last thing that I want to do is take that little bit of happiness that they were thrown and then stomp all over it by having a sour attitude.
Yeah, I love the idea of just normalizing compliments and not seeing a compliment as like foreplay or like leading up to something else. But Puck, I want to highlight something you said. We so thoroughly normalize it that I don't know how many people really had their ears perk up when you said, like, back off, she's mine. It's really worth pointing out, like, everything we're talking about with regards to compersion is directly connected to the idea of autonomy and recognizing that your partner isn't yours. They don't belong to you. And I know that wasn't what you were suggesting,
right?
But we have just become so comfortable as a culture speaking in that way and sort of assuming those things.
Well, religion's got a lot to do with that too, right? That's the whole biblical notion of giving yourself over to your husband, usually. And that is really what's become, I think, is responsible for this petty jealousy that some people seem to experience. At least it's certainly a big part of it, because just anecdotal evidence here, so take it with a grain of salt. But my fellow atheist friends seem to have no problems with compliments or swinging or a gentle peck or a pat on the butt, whereas the religious folks, they're the ones that seem to constantly have beef, and they're the ones that seem to constantly be worried about what other people are doing in their bedrooms.
Yeah, no, I think that we can see most modern religions, certainly Christianity, as a way of maintaining social cohesion in a agricultural society from 3,000 years ago. It doesn't really line up with our modern ideas of who people are and who they should be allowed to be. But with all of that in mind, Nate, I'm going to give you a chance to pull up the phone calls and see who you want to get started with. While you're doing that, though, I guess, Puck, I want to give you a chance to maybe kind of underline everything that we're talking about here and look at why embracing compersion might be useful for folks in our audience. We're going to talk a little bit more about perhaps how to do that. But what else can you let us know? What's your elevator pitch for why this idea of compersion is useful to people who are in monogamous relationships? Okay,
so I had a good, getting into anecdote mode. I had a friend yay long years ago when I was just out of college and my friends had started to get married, and he would get very upset anytime he would look at the wedding announcements in the newspaper. And that should tell you how old I am, because that's how we got wedding announcements in a newspaper. And he would see someone that he maybe knew or at least heard of had gotten married. And for some reason that would fill him with this rage, this unhappiness. And I asked him why one time, and he said it was because even though he might not have wanted to marry that person, he felt that was a little piece of happiness that he was never going to have. Like there's this you talked about relationship scarcity, and like he imagined that happiness was a pie, and that anytime anybody had a little piece of that pie, that's a piece of pie that he was never going to have, and his happiness is limited. And when I first heard that way of describing relationships, I said, well, first of all, if there really is a pie of happiness, this pie is a massive, like bigger than you can possibly imagine. And no amount of anybody having a piece of this pie is going to really make a significant impact on how much happiness I can have. And not only that, but there's parts of that pie that I'm probably not going to want anyway. I hate the crust. I want the filling. So if somebody else is happy having the crust, have it. And if somebody else is happy with the filling that I want, you know what? There's still plenty of happiness. And scarcity is not something that I had to grow out of this idea of there's plenty of happiness to go around. And if somebody else, this was my turning point here, if somebody else finds something that is so rare that they find that person that they want to settle down with and have a relationship with, that's something worth being happy for them for. Because that's how I would want people to be with me. I would, if I was in a relationship and I said, this is the person who I want to marry, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, I would want happiness there for me.
Yeah, well, we could spend hours and hours and honestly thousands of years looking at the psychology of that scarcity versus abundance mindset and what that can actually do for your anxiety, your depression, your love, and your connection, and all of these kinds of things. But before we get into that, Nate, who do you want to talk to on the phones?
Oh, we've got some good ones here today, Christy. First, I want to talk to Alex in New York.
Cool.
Yeah, Alex wants to talk about how polygamy should be legal in the United States. Alex, is that accurate? You're live with Puck and Christy.
Greetings and salutations. Yes, I believe that polygamy should be more legalized, meaning it should be more allowed to marry multiple people and should be more openly accepted.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that marriage equality involves poly relationships being able to be legally identified and validated in the exact same ways as monogamous relationships. But walk me through your pitch.
I honestly have never really understood a reason as to why there shouldn't be. We could easily make, we meaning the United States government, could easily make more money the more marriages. So it's just a little bit extra money in the financial, So that
it's an important piece of equality, I think. Think about
people happy.
When folks are applying for bank loans, when folks are applying to live in a house together, when folks are trying to get insurance through their business, their employer, and all of these kinds of things. You're only allowed to have one spouse in those situations, and it causes meaningful discrimination against people who are in committed, loving, egalitarian relationships, but that don't have that marriage certificate.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
I never really understood it.
I think we have to be careful to divorce polygamy from the odious association with child marriage that we see sometimes in certain churches. If that could be done, then absolutely, I don't see any moral objection to more than one person getting married to more than one person. I mean, that'd be a tough sell to make. But Alex, how do you think we would be able to separate those two? Can we?
Between marriage and religion? Or
between the association is when a lot of people hear polygamy. When I hear polygamy, the first thing I think of is the grown man with 3 wives, one of whom is 15, one is 17, and one is 20, and have never dated anyone else than the person that they were, quote unquote, assigned to. And that I think a lot of people make that distinction, whether it's fair or not. So how do you think we might combat that?
The terminology is definitely a problem here, Alex. I hear that.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely a problem in that case. I think the current legal, to my understanding, from my memory, the current legal age of consent with parental consent is 16 in the U.S.
It varies by state, if I'm not mistaken, which, if we're going to talk about
100%.
how to build this from the ground up, there are a lot of changes we might make, but...
Yeah, for sure.
I would just say blanket statement, religion isn't really needed to have a marriage. You can have, a legally binding marriage without religion, and that's fine.
Totally, yeah.
Because if you bring religion into it, you have to include all the religions, including LaVeyan Satanism, all of them. It doesn't matter. You get into questionable territory where it's just better to not include religion whatsoever.
I see where you're coming from there.
It should be, in the betterment of people. It should, it should be a little bit more, I guess, organized. Anybody over the age of 18, there has to be communication, and there has to be some sort of laws, definitely passed. Lawyers should definitely be involved to some degree. Yeah. Give me half a second.
Sure. No,
I definitely don't disagree. I mean, I do believe that marriage rights should be the same for everybody in this country. And if we were going to Sim City our country from the ground up, I think that we would want to have a conversation about whether or not things like insurance should be tied to our employers, and should they be tied to who we're married to, and should it be difficult to get a bank loan on these lines, and should government even be issuing marriage license? I mean, that's a question that I am genuinely willing to ask. But people were asking the same thing before gay marriage was legalized. People were suggesting that, well, maybe we should just do away with the institution, perhaps not the institution of marriage, but the legalization of it and the licensure of it and all of those kinds of things. And I don't disagree with that notion. But what I will say is, so long as so much of our society is built on it the way that it exists currently, we need to make sure that we're extending those rights to everybody.
Yeah, my only thought that I'm adding to this is that, this is understanding if monogamy or polygamy were to be legalized, that anybody entering to the marriage would have to have the consent of all people who are in that partnership. But I think you're already agreeing with that. This is a conversation I've been trying to have for a long time, where if we can look at the situation and say, well, this is ridiculous, any two people who love each other and want to commit to each other should be able to be married, it's not a very far stretch from that to say, well, that's ridiculous. Any number of people who want to be declared in a marriage together should be able to be married. There's some sticky points in the finer lines of legislation, but I don't see that that's anything we can't work around. What's happening, though, is I don't think there's a really big social push for it yet. It's not like there's crowds of triads who are storming the courthouses demanding that this happen. And I think that by having conversations like this, we're normalizing the idea more, and we're getting the idea out of people's head that it's just about an old man and three teenage girls. Now it's about, this is what poly relationships actually look like. These are four people that want to commit to each other, have a household together. Let's let them get married.
Fair to say.
I'm also not
put that better than I did, Puff. Thank you.
I'm also not a fan of how outlawed it is in certain states. Like, it's just straight up illegal to be in a polygamous relationship.
Yeah, and I mean, there are still places where you can get into pretty incredible trouble for infidelity and these kinds of things. And what the role of government in enforcing morality ought to be is a very, very big question. But I think we can, at the very least, agree that we should be basing those rules and basing that discussion on reason, on logic, and not on a bunch of ancient poetry from agricultural societies.
Thank you for this. Was a great subject to talk about.
I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to start with as many freedoms as possible and limit them based on good reasons, right? There's no reason why 3 or 4 adults shouldn't be able to share a home and share a relationship and share a bed. The government should have nothing to do with that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And
If
unless
anything, they should
unless
be
I saw a
encouraged.
demonstrated reason why something should be illegal, well, then it probably shouldn't.
If anything, they should be encouraged to get married. If they want that, they should be allowed to have that right.
I couldn't agree more, Alex. I couldn't agree more. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well,
All
thank
right.
you
calling.
very
We
much for
appreciate your
calling.
time.
That
Question.
was
I'm
that
glad
was
I got
awesome.
to work with it.
That was right on
An
point.
absolute pleasure.
Awesome.
Cool.
You have a great night, Alex.
Nate, you want to hit us with one more?
I think
No,
we
I'm
have
good.
more.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Let's get. Ooh, this is a good one. We have a story coming.
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
We have Carpe Diem on the line from Colorado, and they have Carpe Diem. You've got a story for us. I love stories. Let me get some s'mores. I'll get some marshmallows.
I won't actually spend too much time in the story because I think it's better to spend time in discussion. I just wanted to share that for months I have been very worried about coming out to my wife as someone who is poly and pan, and I was very, very worried about that, right? And scared about what would happen to my marriage once I said that, right? And then what I actually did, which I strongly recommend for anybody else to do, is I actually encouraged my wife to do a sexual compatibility survey with me, just to see what kinds of things we would be interested in doing together, right? And there were all kinds of interesting questions, and she was like laughing and smirking the whole time, which made me super curious. When the results came out, she insisted on not only seeing the things we agreed on, but also what we disagreed on. And in the end, we barely disagreed on anything, and it turns out that she wanted exactly what I did. So that was also a very awesome moment for me, right? But more importantly, I think what I wanted to talk about is since then we've already embarked full head on in this life, but in concordance has been. It's interesting that you guys are talking about that because it's been the core of what we talked about from the start. Because for us, it's like. You can't talk about not being all for each other or not being enough for each other or being bored versus all those things. But our attitude is more about like, what are we giving to each other here? What are we allowing each other to engage with here, right? And what are we being open to as opposed to closed to? So it's kind of like a mentality or an attitude shift of not looking at things as possessions, but as gifts, right? And not looking at what the other person gives you as a demand, but more of like her presence in my life is a benefit that I have, right? And and vice versa. So ever since we started doing things, things have gotten a lot better. So I wanted to share that part and then ask one or two questions briefly, if that's okay. The first one for the entire panel that I want to talk about is the interplay between consent and fidelity, even in a poly relationship. And I'll explain what that means. And by poly, I don't necessarily mean just sexually poly, but like that emotional connection. Because at first, my wife and I were a little weary of connecting emotionally to others. But then we also realized, why should we deprive each other of any experience in life, including loving others? More love in life is only a good thing, not a bad thing. That's where we landed now, right? But
sure.
But one thing that we still struggle with is how. And again, this is kind of like, although concordance is the goal, it is a mistake to pretend that jealousy cannot creep in, and that you should not talk about that. Right? That honesty, that openness is very important, right? So otherwise, things start to implode. So one thing that we have talked about is what happens when we are in the middle of something, right? And then one of us feels like it should stop, but the thing that we're doing, it also involves another person doing something. So, I mean, if I can get specific, like if we're having like a threesome, and then one of us says, I don't want to have this threesome anymore. Does that make sense? But like, I'm in the middle of it, and then now my wife wants to pull out the plug. We've talked a lot about how that looks like, and it should have happened in the first place, because I feel very uncomfortable with anything that has to do with sexuality when you cannot pull the plug even in the middle of it. Are you with me? So I wanted you guys to talk about that. What do you guys think?
No, the reason I was patting my head there is that's a sign that my partner and I have, that if ever they're in a situation where we're out with people or in with people, something is happening that they want to stop, pat your head 3 times. No matter what's going on, everything stops right there, and I'll do what I can to make sure the situation is over. It absolutely makes sense to have these rules in place where you can pull the plug at any time, and it should be understandable where those are. You're right that when you say that. Sometimes sexual situations will develop that you could not have possibly planned for in advance. It just happens, and you need to decide what you're going to do with it on the spot. And one great way is to know, okay, nope, this is too far. I got to pull the plug. And to know that that's okay to do. This is why, in a very ironic way, meeting up with people in swingers clubs and through these websites, it's almost better and safer because they understand, other couples might have this because we have a pull the plug sign too. So they know what it's like. They know they're completely understanding. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown, but I understand why you need to stop it at that point. So thank you very much for bringing that up, and I think it's up to every couple to decide, what they want to do. We didn't get a chance to talk about this situation, but our little way of doing it is we have signals that we can send to each other saying, definitely this is not good. We got to stop. What have you heard, Christy?
At the same time, Carpe Diem, I think you're hitting on a really important point here, which is something that people often forget when they are just beginning a journey into non-monogamy, which is the rights of the hypothetical third. When we are sitting in our living room and we're having kind of fantasy conversations about what would it look like to date other people? What would it look like to have these other relationships or other experiences? It's all rainbows and fantasies, and it sounds really nice. And this like hypothetical person that we fantasize about isn't fleshed out as a living, breathing human with like feelings and thoughts and autonomy and
Absolutely.
rights. And so it's really common for couples that jump into non-monogamy without having done their homework, without having done the responsible thing by opening up their relationship with the support of at least a lot of good literature, if not a non-monogamy coach or a counselor or a therapist of some sort. They tend to make all of these like rules and agreements that don't actually respect the rights and autonomy of that hypothetical third person. And then 6 months down the road, when that third person is flesh and blood, things start to get really, really messy. And so I think that everything that you're pointing out is just a good reminder to be respectful of the autonomy of everybody involved in these situations. And frankly, to do your homework before opening up your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to say something about what Puck said, because one important aspect of my question, which I think was not talked about also either, is that if you were in like a norm, I hate to say normal, but if you were in a standard heterosexual relationship and you're in the middle of sex, and all of a sudden your partner, who you thought was going to do things to you, is no longer going to do things to you, it should be their right to pull the plug, right? And what I'm saying is that all people, not just me and my wife or whoever, or else, like all people should have that power, right? That autonomy. And if we don't feel comfortable with what my wife is now doing, it gets complicated, because why am I not feeling comfortable? Am I getting jealous? Where's the concordance right now? But doesn't matter, right? If I'm in an emotional place that I don't feel comfortable, do I have the right to tell somebody else that's doing something with somebody else to stop, right? All of these conversations are something that you have to have before you're in the moment, because if you're in the moment, it's too late to have these conversations. And then sometimes, out of respect for each other, you have the sign, so you can have the conversation when you didn't have the conversation yet. But it's better if you anticipated those moments by talking about, like, what happens if I'm in the middle of it and I don't feel right about what's happening after all, right? And so I think that's the part that got complicated. And even though we had prepared, it has already happened a few times. So that's why it's important I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, do your homework, have your good communication. Do not take a existing relationship and open it up without a lot of thoughtful communication. I think that's the biggest takeaway here.
Absolutely. And the other thing is too, is don't have that expectation that when you do open up your relationship, that everything's going to go smoothly. When my partner and I first brought a third into our relationship, we talked about it first. We discussed some rules as to who was going to fuck who and who was going to suck who. And these hypotheticals were going through our minds. And then when we had the conversation, drunk as lords one night with the third and thought that we had anticipated every possible situation and sort of got into it. And it hit me like a ton of bricks when I saw someone else fucking my partner, that I might not be as ready for this as I thought I was. Now, I got there eventually and I got around that and we got to a point where we all had some fun, but don't expect that even if you do make all these rules and you do, if you do prepare for it, there still is going to be some stuff, as you say, Carper, there's going to be stuff that comes up that you're not prepared for. So just approach it with empathy and compassion for everybody involved and try to have some fun and sort it out with towels when you're all done.
It's always a good idea to bring a towel.
Always bring a towel.
Don't
forget to bring a towel.
Everything. I mean, I'm in Colorado, so that joke is especially funny. But everything that you actually said resonates with the experience that I had. The last question I'll leave you guys with, and I don't necessarily need to be here for the rest of the conversation, but that's this one. I just literally want to hear from you guys. How do you decide how much do you need to know about what the other partner is doing? Because this is the place where I am with my wife right now, and this is where we're currently talking about. Because so far we've done everything together, but we're getting to a point where we're talking about, does it need to be together? I don't feel like it needs to be together. And she says, like, that doesn't need to be together. I don't think so either. And so, but then we are also talking about like, how do you decide how much do you need to know about what the other partner is doing? Is openness important? Take it away.
Like I can give you like my experience.
We'll get right on it, Carpe. Thank you so much for calling.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like
Bye, guys.
in my experience, and like I guess I can only speak for mine. It's been evolving over time. Where in the beginning it used to be, we should tell each other every time something happens. Every time, we'd get into as much detail as the other person wants to, and then it kind of evolved from there. When you are have the same second partner or outside partner, eventually you just want to know, okay, what time are you going to be home for dinner? So it's going to evolve and it's going to change from person to person and relationship to relationship. And it's just important to keep that talk going. It's like, well, okay, what do you want to know? And one great way to do that is to just put them in a situation like, okay, let's sit down. What do you want to know about what happened or what's going to happen? And feel it out situation by situation. And maybe it will evolve. Maybe you'll want to hear less as you trust each other, or maybe it gets you really hot and you want to talk more about what happened with other people. So just, having that opportunity to I don't know if recap is the right word. What's the right word for this, Christy?
I don't know, maybe to open up and share. I mean,
yeah.
Certainly there are couples that sort of get off on each other's erotic adventures and sharing those stories. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, I encourage people to embrace that if that's their turn on. But I think that we're, again, talking about autonomy here. And this is something that I think really applies outside of an open relationship, because how honest do you need to be about how honest do you need to be about the time you spent with your friends and what those conversations look like? How honest do you need to be about your therapy appointment and what those conversations look like? I mean, we have a right and a need to have a little bit of space for ourselves and to have some privacy in these kinds of ways. But everybody's needs are going to be totally different. So I think it comes more down to negotiation than anything else here.
Yeah, negotiation and honesty, right? Like having and
you don't have to say everything, but what you say should be true, right? That honesty idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you should be able to have an honest conversation and an open conversation and expect that sometimes something might get missed, something might go wrong, and just be kind to the other person. As long as everybody involved is being honest, that should be the most important thing. I can't, like you said, it's up to the couple as to what they're comfortable with. Like, my partner and I don't engage in sexual activities with others unless the other person's there. That's what we're both comfortable with. That's what we both like. We like to watch each other occasionally. And if the other person wasn't there, it just wouldn't be hot. It wouldn't click, because we have that, we're connected, like, I don't know if soulmates is the right word, but like we're life partners, like he's my forever human. So it's, if he wasn't there, yeah. But everybody's going to be different.
And yeah, so it really does come down to that ability to negotiate and to be honest, if not necessarily transparent. And there's not a right way or a wrong way to do it. Often people in the poly world will sort of deify this idea of kitchen table polyamory. This is the gold standard of what a relationship could potentially look like, where everybody could very comfortably sit down together around the table and eat breakfast, and everybody can be open and honest about everything that's going on between all of these different relationships. And that's beautiful. If you want that, go find somebody to build that. It's also perfectly valid to be in a don't ask, don't tell type of relationship. As a therapist, I'm always a little leery of anything that is going to involve lying and sneaking around, even if it's sort of semi-consensual lying or however we want to frame that. But I also want to acknowledge that you have a right to some privacy, so long as you're being honest and you're being open about the things that you're being secretive about, if that makes any kind of sense. But there's a lot here and more that I want to get into. Before we do, though, I know that the folks in the booth actually have a video that they're going to queue up for us. So let's roll that when we can. All right. Well, I don't know if anybody else is now currently picturing Lil Nas X twerking and grinding against Matt Dillahunty. Thank you, and you're welcome.
That's so frustrating. I hate that for you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry Oprah did that to you.
We need the internet to be peer-reviewed.
Peer-reviewed.
Which I don't know how much more white Christian nationalism we really need.
None. We need none of that at all.
Fair. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Negative 200% on that one. Yeah.
Afraid of getting infected by these variants. I send you love rings as well. I want you to put your hands on your computer. I want you to touch them right now.
You're scaring me, Johnny.
Please, God, tell me right now what I should say when I call into the atheist experience. And if you do not want me to do this, please tell me, don't call the atheist experience.
Oh boy. All right. So that's a good time right there.
Johnny Osteen. Wow. I didn't know he had it in him.
Yeah. All right. Well, suffice to say that there is some incredible programming each and every week. If you missed any of those inside jokes, it is absolutely worth it to go and check it out. And you're welcome for the double dose of this big mug.
Yeah, there's a good chunk of the audience who doesn't watch live, and even if they are doing it through YouTube, they're listening in the background or whatnot and not really watching. I encourage these people to watch this because if you don't recognize voices, you can see that there was a lot of cross hosting going on there. Just in that one clip, there was a lot of The ACA is a good model for poly relationships and trading hosts back and forth and seeing who's good for what show. That's why I'm here. So
True that.
All right.
True that.
Well, back to our conversation around compersion and jealousy and these different things. I'll say again that we're really addressing topics all across the monogamy spectrum, if we want to call it that. I mean, whether you are in a strictly monogamous relationship, maybe one that allows for like the occasional threesome, or whether you're just a total relationship anarchist. For me, embracing compersion starts with addressing toxic monogamy. And, we did a full episode on that idea, and I definitely encourage people to check it out. We'll have links to that in the show notes for this episode. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of, angry YouTube comments just because we are using that word toxic and some of these things. But I am curious, just for a primer, how do you define that idea? I mean, what is toxic monogamy in a few sentences?
I've always thought of toxic traits as like one is the ones that are put there as societal expectations or expectations placed upon you because this is the kind of relationships that you see and other people are thinking that this is the best kind of relationship for you, and then they stick their grubby little noses in your relationships business and tries to tell you, hey, this is how it should be, whereas nobody knows better what you need in a relationship than you do, and nobody knows what your partner needs better than they do. And really, it's up to the people in the relationship to make the best decisions for them about what is best for their relationship. So when I think of toxic traits, that's the first thing that I think of. It's standards and expectations externally and unconsensually placed, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm missing a whole bunch in that definition, but that's the first thing that I think of is expectations and the idea of supposed to. And it's not
that
always
idea
conscious.
supposed to is huge here. I mean, I think that looms large over everything that we're talking about. And if there is one idea that we could perhaps borrow from the polyamorist and teleport it into our everyday life, it's that notion of kind of designing your own relationship from the ground up and not feeling like you're locked into the template model. Yeah.
Yeah, and just because you have a relationship that it seems like nobody else is having, if it is good for you and it's making you the best person you can be, and it's helping your partner be the best person they can be, sure, run it. Just because you don't see it elsewhere doesn't mean it's not functional for you.
Well said.
Yeah,
Well
and that's
said.
why I love shows like this where we're talking about the very different relationships that we have. And Nate, you were talking about how you always, your rules for including others, and I'm thinking about my rules, and they're very different from those. But your relationship is your business, and you're happy with it, and you and your partner are better people for it. It works for you, and that's great. It's not necessarily how we do things over here in the Puck household, and that's just as okay.
Absolutely. And I would never presume to tell another person that their rules that make them happy are not okay. And I have experienced that in our lives where certain people seem to want to think that they can tell us that, oh, well, you're not monogamous because you slept with redacted. Right. And it's like, who made you the arbiter of what counts as a monogamous relationship or what does or does not make us happy or what will or will not lead to the breakdown of our relationship? And it seems to always be these people who like can't seem to maintain a relationship for more than, a few months before things go horribly awry that are telling us how we, what's wrong with our long-term relationship. Like, honey,
Fair
we're
to
coming
say.
up on 10 years on the 31st. So, go sing your song to somebody else.
Well, good on you.
Thank you. That's I'm over. My rant is concluded. Thank you.
Well, I think that in order to acknowledge jealousy and to do something about it, we have to be able to like see it when it pops up. And I think understanding these ideas of toxic monogamy is a piece of that. But it's worthwhile to just be noticing those places where jealousy comes up in our life, because that's where we send the compersion. I think about compersion in much the same way I think about compassion. That word compassion just means being with the pain. It doesn't necessarily mean that things don't hurt. It doesn't mean that life isn't hard anymore. It just means that you identify where that hurt is, and that's where you send your nurturance. That's where your kindness goes. That's where your compassion goes. So if compersion is sort of like the white blood cells or the anything that is like just restorative and healing, we have to kind of send it to where that jealousy is and where that jealousy pops up. Do y'all have any thoughts about how to identify jealousy in your own lives or moments where maybe you're being a little bit controlling or maybe you're not respecting your partner's autonomy in those same ways?
Being so far into it now and being so mindful of it, I have to like go way back in my thinking about how I handled past relationships, and to an extent the ones I have now way back in the beginning. I suppose we should start first by saying that jealousy is like completely natural, and it's an emotional response. And just because we're not at all saying that jealousy is bad, and if you feel jealousy at all, then there's something like very wrong with it. No, it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, pain is
yeah.
a healthy experience. Like nobody likes pain, but if you didn't feel it, you would, get into bathwater that's going to burn you. You'd leave your hand on the stove. Like these kinds of problems start to come up. Jealousy might be painful, and we might want to be able to like send some compassion, send some compersion in that direction.
Compersion.
Yeah, the fact that you're feeling jealousy just means that things are working correctly.
Right. And like you can start noticing this like in the way you view just your friends, when they talk about little victories that they have. Maybe one of them got a raise or got a relationship milestone, and seeing how you handle other people celebrating their victories and seeing like, okay, am I genuinely happy for them, or am I like, wait, it's like I work hard at my job. Why is this not happening to me? Like you can't help the feelings. You can't help what you start to do about it. And I would say that one interesting first step to do is take these people who are celebrating their victories on Facebook or any other social media and just give them an honest congratulations. Sure. And just start to cultivate the idea of they are happy. Let's feed that happiness. And maybe it'll have an effect on you too.
No, as something like I basically use social media for news and like making really stupid jokes. That's it. That's my everything. Like if I say something on social media, it's probably smug. That's about the only like tone that I have. But I think you're right, Puck, that there's real value in being intentional about, even if it seems cheesy, even if it feels like sort of that corporate birthday card, everybody has like a group collective once a month birthday kind of bullshit philosophy, that there is something really healthy about making an effort and pushing yourself, even if it doesn't feel sincere at first, to express a level of happiness for other people's happiness.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Well, it is there. I mean, there is a genuine sense of like, something good happened to somebody else, and there is that honest, there is a feel good there, and it's going to be at different times in different places, and certainly for different things. Like maybe there's a party that you can't get over another person getting married, and it's like that is the one thing that still grinds my gears. But since you are aware that you have this ability to be happy for other people elsewhere, this is now something you can consciously work on. You can say, okay, how can I be more aware that just because another person is in a relationship, that doesn't mean I can't be happy for them. Now, I'm by no means a professional therapist, so I only have my ideas as to what one can actually do to take those steps. But it seems like that would be an interesting place to start.
Yeah. Well, if jealousy is not a bad thing in and of itself, and we're not talking about like ripping out our jealousy, how else can we cultivate compersion? What are the other habits, maybe even like daily exercises or day-to-day tasks that help to cultivate these types of emotions?
Outside of your relationship, you can do that by, like I suggested, go to social media, congratulate the people who are celebrating milestones. Even if it's just something like, hey, I lost 5 pounds. You know what? It's a big deal to them. And it means it takes nothing off of you to say, you know what, congratulations for starting to meet your goals. Inside your relationship, one fun activity is just to talk to your partner and say, okay, well, what have you accomplished lately that you feel really proud of? Just hear it from them. Hear from them what's been making them happy lately. And then just taking a moment to have nothing else be important except for them celebrating their victory. No matter how small or insignificant it may seem to you, it's important. It's what they chose to bring up. So make something out of it.
Yeah, working in conversation to be happy for people, to try and identify like what is the thing that people are wanting to get some attention on, and is there a way to offer support in these places?
Yeah. And it'll also help you identify places like if you do have an insecurity about something, that's something you can start talking about also when you identify, okay, this makes me insecure when this happens when this happens with you. That's something that can be brought up. It's usually not something that the partner is doing intentionally or maliciously to hurt you. It's usually just, they're being their own person and they succeeded. And now find a way to turn that around to being happy for them. And realizing that those feelings you have might not be coming from a rational basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, like you said, it's not about what you're feeling, but what you do with what you're feeling. So someone like me, especially early in a lot of my relationships, as somebody who's aware that they have some anger issues, is asking myself, whenever I start to feel that anger or that upsetness, is asking myself, is this really worth it? Like, am I being the asshole here, or did that person really screw up? But that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of humility to be able to honestly introspect that way and realize that sometimes, yeah, you know what, I am kind of being a dick. I should just let this go. But and as you sort of practice that, it becomes more natural, it becomes quicker, and then over time you don't get it anymore, or not as much anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that there's real value in just recognizing the different ways that we communicate around all of these issues, and to, again, uncouple this from like romantic and sexual relationships and just try to embrace that type of supportiveness in our daily lives, because it's kind of a nice thing to do just as human beings, but then because it does tend to show up in these spaces, and we do feel less jealous, less envious of the people in our lives if we actively work to be rooting for them and supporting them in these different spaces.
Yeah, like any skill, it takes practice for sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Like you're bringing up one thing too, and that's specific to like people who like to make content on YouTube, and then you can see if this applies to other situations also in your lives, where there's a very nebulous connection as a content creator between the effort that you put in and the number of views, comments, and engagement that you get. There's not a lot of good correlation. So it seems like you might be feeling like you're putting in a lot of effort to your content and a lot of effort into your live streams, and then you look over here at someone else who, of course, you have no idea what they're actually doing, but they seem to be getting so much more success than you do. And in one sense, you could look at that and you could say, you know what, I don't understand. There's something going on there. The system's just completely rigged against me. There's no possible way I can succeed, so I might as well give up. Or you could say, you know what, I am glad that the message is getting out there. I am glad that, like, I might not be the most popular atheist YouTuber, but someone else is helping to get this message out. I am glad to be part of this sphere, but more important than my individual success is the fact that this message, there's something bigger than me that is happening in a positive way that I can get behind. So there's a good specific example that we can talk about how to turn that jealousy into something a little more positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll say here before we get too much further down the road that I really want to recommend the Jealousy Workbook, which is a collection of exercises and different insights and advice by Kathy Librola. And I'll make sure to have a link to that in the notes attached to this episode. But that book is a really meaningful way of just looking at the way we interact with our partner and maybe the sense of ownership that we often feel, and helping to decouple from that. I think we so often see our emotions as maybe out of our control, or as maybe being like the responsibility of the thing that set them off in the first place. If our partner makes us feel jealous, then it's somehow their responsibility or their mistake. And the fact of the matter is, we are in control of our emotions more so than we realize. And I don't just mean like managing your anger or managing your behavior in the distinction that Nate was making a moment ago, but I think that we can actually cultivate specific emotional experiences. And the fact that you are feeling jealous doesn't make that jealousy noble. It doesn't make it inevitable. I mean, it's valid, and if it's occurring, that's okay. You don't necessarily need to rip it out and root and stem, but it is within your power to make some changes there.
Absolutely. Well said. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at is sort of self-regulating there.
Mm-hmm.
But you said it much better than I did. That's probably that's why Christy's got the degree.
Yeah,
know,
You're
this
the
is-
law talking.
This is why it always
guy.
feels just a little tiny awkward, because like I can talk about my personal experiences, what I've done, and what's worked for me and the people that I know. But Christy over here is the champion. He's the one with the expertise and the knowledge and how to apply it to more people's lives than just mine.
I mean, I've read a bunch of good books, and I'm very proud of that fact. But you can read all the books in the world, and jealousy will still hit you in the mouth if you aren't prepared for it. And so I think having those personal experiences and finding something that fits for you is incredibly valuable. But in any case, we've talked around a number of different things. We've been kind of touching on the idea of autonomy and how that is a factor in jealousy. Maybe that expectation, that sense of like ownership or control or even obligation to one another that we have in relationships. And I feel like one of the challenges here is that we so often confuse autonomy and distance. You know, when people say like, oh, they're a very autonomous couple or they have a very autonomous relationship, I think that maybe brings up this idea that they don't spend a lot of time together. And I would just say for my own part, I'm in perhaps the most autonomous relationship I've ever been in. Like we have the most amount of freedom to be ourselves, of permission to do what we want to do. And particularly in this world where everybody is working from home and everything else, I think we've spent more time around one another in the last year than I've ever spent with another human being, you know, after the age of like 3 or 4 years old. And so autonomy and distance aren't the same thing, but they get confused. So what are some examples of that distinction that y'all might be able to help draw out here?
Like, you know, I keep on talking that my partner and I have very different interests and whatnot. But one thing that we always have is that we share those with each other, right? She likes to do shows and theater and choir and whatnot. I don't, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be there to support the shows when they happen. I try to go to as many as I can and help rehearse or anything else that I can do to help further that, even though it's their own interest, right? So just because you're pursuing your own interest does not necessarily mean the other person is not a part of it. And it also doesn't mean that just because you have a lot of these that there aren't things that you're not doing together. One thing that I always like having in my relationship is a big goal, something that you're working on long term. You chip away at it whenever you have free time. It's something that you always have together. So even though it's not constant, it's always still there. There's still something that's holding you together as a couple, even though you're doing a number of things completely separate. So yeah, I see where that you can kind of get that idea where you hear about a couple that, you know, it seems like they never do anything together, but no, there's a lot of times when they're probably doing something just behind the scenes that they do just for them.
Well, and frankly, the ability to have autonomy, the ability to watch the shows that you enjoy, to have the experiences that you enjoy, to have permission to have your own thoughts and opinions and feelings, that those boundaries make it a lot more pleasant to be around somebody, right? Like if you are feeling controlled, if you feel like you do not have good autonomy in a relationship, that relationship is going to include a lot of avoidance. And, you know, not for nothing, but if you are in a relationship right now and you're listening to this and you feel as if your partner never has time for you, never wants to share in your activities or things like that, it might be worth asking yourself the question, is this person avoiding me because that's the only way that they feel like they can have autonomy? That's the only way they feel like they can be themselves, is to not be around me.
You know, you're reminding me of one of the early struggles in our relationship. They never talk about this and never teach you how to be alone together, where you're not necessarily doing anything, they're not necessarily doing anything, but you also don't feel, you eventually get to the point where you don't feel like you need to be entertaining each other through that. You can be on the couch doing your own thing, they can be on the couch doing their own thing, but sometimes it takes a while for a relationship to get to that point, because, you know, when you're dating, you feel like, oh, this is the time we have together, I need to be on entertain mode, or at least in available in case they want to do something, and to be able to make that turn in the relationship, to be alone together. I can't think of a better word for it. So you get that oxymoron.
Yeah.
To learn to do your own thing and not have it diminish the relationship in any way. Takes a little practice, takes some getting used to, but we got there.
And it's so worth it when you do eventually get there, you know, like if you can be in the same room and, you know, they could be watching, say, an anime, which I friggin' hate anime. I can't stand it, but you know, like, I could pop in some headphones and I can play on the Switch, and we can be in the same room and be doing completely different things, right? But we're still together, right? So it's like it's not like autonomy and distance are necessarily the same things. You know, we take separate vacations. I go into the bush for at least 3 days a year and go hunting, and my partner hates camping, can't stand it, doesn't want to be outside, hates bugs, right? But he can go to his friend's house and they can watch all the Sailor Moon anime they want, and I can go into the bush with a bottle of whiskey and not shoot a damn thing. And it's great. We're stronger partners for it. So that notion that you need, like Puck said, like that you need to always be together and always working for each other, like it's really a fallacy. It's not real, man.
No, especially when we here in Texas are perhaps looking at more lockdowns and looking at more quarantine experiences and things like that. It's worth recognizing the value in that type of parallel play, that ability to be in a space together without necessarily directly interacting. But, you know, I mentioned, you know, if your partner is avoiding you, or if you have that experience of they don't want to like share in activities with you, it might possibly be a sign that they don't feel like they have that autonomy. They don't have that freedom. Are there any other red flags or maybe like emotions or signs that we might notice in ourselves when we are in a relationship that doesn't have a good understanding of boundaries and autonomy? What tips might y'all recommend here for just noticing those feelings?
I think when you notice, like, one thing is if you're starting to ask for the space or starting to do things without talking about the underlying reasons why, or feeling like you can't bring up the underlying reasons why. Like I might feel, oh, you know, we've been around each other a little too much this weekend. I'm going to go to the bookstore for a couple of hours. And without talking about, you know, yeah, sure, bookstores are fun. You can definitely spend some time there. But then you got to really figure out, what is it that's making me feel like I can't be here? And I would say one of the big red flags is if you feel that can't be brought up, or if you feel that your partner isn't receptive to even having that conversation. And that's something that you guys can work on. Of course, you're the expert again, Christy. I'm just digging back in my own past and trying to think of examples where it's like, wait a second, when did I not feel very good about this, and what did I end up doing about it to make it better? And that would be one of them, when you take actions, but you're not talking about the reasons behind the actions.
Mm-hmm. Or if you feel afraid to ask for things. I'm not saying that our partners need to give us everything that we ask for, or even that they need to give us permission for everything that we would perhaps want to do. But if you are uncomfortable with the thought of even asking the question, you know, if you are worried about being like punished for even suggesting that you might watch Netflix with somebody else, or whatever else the thing might be, that might be a good sign that there's a lack of good autonomy here.
So you're saying I shouldn't have watched season 2 of The Orville without them there?
I mean, if it was part of your agreement, I have to say.
So that's why I've been on the couch for a week. Thank you, Christy. Thank you.
Like, to me, the sign of a good, healthy relationship dynamic is if even after you've been hurt, you can talk about, you know, it's like, this is what happened. This is the way I'm feeling about it. What can we do going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again? Mm-hmm. And as long as you're comfortable having that conversation, then, you know, it hurt's inevitable. It's going to happen. You know, you're going to accidentally do something that sets your
willingness
partner
to
off
talk about that hurt and actually like make space for some conversation around it and potentially do something about it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we've already talked about a bunch of different resources and a bunch of different, other conversations and other ideas to be considering here. And again, I'm going to make sure to have links to all of that good kind of stuff. But before Nate takes us out for the night, do either of y'all have any final thoughts? Maybe a recommendation for a YouTube video or a podcast, or honestly, just some kind of last advice on how to embrace compersion, maybe convert jealousy into compersion, and to embrace a little bit more like autonomy and freedom in our relationships. What are y'all's final ideas here?
I still like going back to that exercise about going to your social media feeds, finding people who are celebrating victories, and genuinely expressing your happiness for them. Even if it's not necessarily a goal you would have, they're happy about it. They're proud of it. That's worthy of congratulations. Just go in there and say thank you very much. Congratulations on reaching your goal. Congratulations on your new job. Anything that they have that they're happy about, practice like being vocal about being happy for them. That's an interesting start, and there's a number of resources that are available on the websites in the down below part. It's weird that almost all the books about compersion still mention poly, but there's so many ways that learning about genuine happiness for others can affect not just monogamous relationships, but all relationships that you have. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, one of the most valuable things for me is I've already mentioned it, but it's introspection, and it's being able to, when you start to feel something, to sort of try and analyze that and take yourself out of the moment and ask yourself some honest, sometimes tough questions. Like Puck said, it's not wrong to feel an emotion, but what you do with that emotion is what could be possibly right or wrong.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very important distinction, that our emotions are always valid. You know, they may not be rational, they may not be based on fact and reason, but they're coming from a reasonable place. They are valid and they exist, but we don't have to obey them. We might want to listen to them, but we don't have to do what they say or what we think they're telling us, and they don't give us permission to be an asshole.
Right. And sometimes they lead us astray. So, that's why we have our big brain hats on.
Yeah. I like that notion. Well, with that, Nate, I'm going to let you, give any final thoughts you might have, and then take us out for the evening.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you, Christy.
Sure.
We were talking about this earlier, but now that you know a little bit more about our relationship dynamic, what label would you put on if we had to have a relationship name tag? Are we poly? Are we monogamish? Where would
where would we fall?
Where
on
does
that
therapist
spectrum?
Christy put us? Yeah, I want to know.
Oh man, well, I've been doing a lot of research on neuroqueering, and I'm gonna just let people sort of be curious about that notion. But yeah, Nate, I don't know. Maybe we would work as I think relationship anarchy. I think that's the only real way to describe the connection that you and I have been forming these past few months.
I like it. As a kid who used to have a mohawk and listen to Rancid, I love it.
I don't even know what that means, but I love it.
Oh, Puck, you don't have to cover up your mohawk. Let your freak flag fly, buddy. Amazing. So, folks, if you want more of this lunacy, more of this hilarity, and more of this content, AEN Podcast is your source for all things ACA. The wonderful clips that we saw earlier from Truth Wanted, the Atheist Experience, nonprofits, Talk Heathen, you name it, folks. Tiny.cc AEN Podcast is your one-stop shop for all of our lunacy. And if you want a little more personal interaction, you can hit us up on Facebook at our fan group, Secular Sexuality fan group, by fans, for fans. It's an unofficial group, but, we're all there. Christy's there. He's always talking, posting stuff. Great resources. So come on, visit us, talk to us. Puck's even on there, aren't you too, Puck? Puck's pretty
Yes,
active.
yes, I'm in that group.
Yeah, I've seen him on there too. And for some even more in-depth conversation, we'll be heading over to Discord, to our official, unofficial Discord, tiny.cc/ACD Discord. Or is it ACA Discord or ACD? I think it's ACD. ACD Discord.
It's been both. I believe both links will still get you there, but we're at tiny.cc/ACD Discord.
ACD Discord. Perfect. And join us for the after show, folks. If you're watching this live, then join us in the Discord. We're all going to be there to continue this conversation with a little bit for a little while. And finally, we've got merch. Get some merch. bit.ly/AEN merch. Get yourself a cup. Get yourself a t-shirt. Get yourself a bumper sticker. Show your support. Buy some swag. And finally, last but definitely not least, never least, we have some of the wonderful, most hardworking, dedicated folks working behind the scenes to make all of this stuff happen. Look at them all. We got our crew cam up there. Wow.
Look at Katie. Sure. Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. Was it because of
good work.
I wonder if
Good
it was
work.
because of my scintillating promotion that she got that shirt. Yeah.
It was the ad
Yes.
read. It was
Awesome.
the ad read. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll turn it over to you, Christy.
Yeah, well, I do hope that folks will join us. But more than that, I hope that they will just walk away from this conversation, not necessarily seeking to make like big dramatic changes in their life or in their relationship, but just a little bit more aware of the ways that we unintentionally oftentimes kind of coerce or put pressure on our relationships or on our partners to do or be or act or share specific things with us that maybe they haven't actively and intentionally consented to, or that they are only doing or consenting to through a form of coercion, and are looking to find ways to maybe notice some of the jealousy and the control in our lives. And then to respond to that jealousy with a little bit of compersion, to find a little bit of joy in the way that they connect with people, and to really actively work to cultivate that sense of being happy for others in daily life. This is all stuff that it's never a destination. It's not a flip that's going to get switched. It's just a aspiration. It's something that we're all hoping to be 1% better at tomorrow than we were today. So with that, we hope that you will work to be the best possible version of yourself, and that you probably deserve a good reward and can maybe take a quiet moment and give yourself a big old orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.